This was the moment that a 32,000-ton container ship slammed into a steel bridge in Baltimore, toppling the structure in a matter of seconds.
Someone did this intentionally, then someone gains. And it could be as much as anybody, someone in the United States messing around who has the capability of doing that kind of a cyber attack, or other kinds, who knows. But clearly it's easy to talk about adversaries like Russia and China and Iran and others who are always happy to see the American economy in any way take a hit. Well, if it was a black swan event, it was horribly executed, because it really didn't have the effect that they'd be thinking of on a national scale. Trying to hide by miraculously coming out the next day and saying, oh, we're just going to cover the whole thing and pay for it. Yeah, we're talking about a multi-year process. It's not just going to happen regardless of any election of any president. And that's because the DC system will always be there regardless of, basically they watch the presidents come and go, and they're only remotely interested in who they are, because they're just going to continue with the agenda they've held for decades.
Hallo zusammen zu einer neuen Ausgabe des USA-Reports. Heute möchten wir darüber sprechen, was am 26. März in Baltimore passiert ist. Wir alle haben davon gehört, dass die Francis Scott Key Bridge eingestürzt ist durch das Frachterschiff Dali. Wir wissen aber nicht, was genau passiert ist. Wir haben keine Ahnung, ob es eine Terrorattacke war, ein sogenannter Cyberanschlag. Wir wissen auch nicht, ob es menschliches Versagen war, aber die schnelle Reaktion von der Biden-Regierung, dass Amerikas Steuerzahler für die vollkommene Reparatur gerade stehen wird, ist verwunderlich. Warum lässt Biden die Insurance Company, die Versicherungsgesellschaft, nicht ihre Experten zu dem Unfallort fahren, um rauszufinden, wer denn jetzt schuld war? Was möchte die Regierung verbergen? Ist es wirklich eine Cyberattacke? Wer würde am meisten davon profitieren? Was bringt es zu schnell zu sagen, dass es eine Attacke von außen oder sogar von innen, ein sogenanntes 9/11-Event gewesen ist? Warum werden so schnell Worte wie Black Swan Event verwendet? Das alles möchte ich mit Darin Gaub heute besprechen, und ich hoffe, euch gefällt die Sendung, und hören wir doch in das Interview herein. We are talking today about the Baltimore Bridge accident, and I want to know from you, Darin, what do you think can happen now to the American economy? What results do you think American people has to face? Because in Baltimore, it's a very, very important harbor. Mm. And so what are your opinion? What can American expect now?
Well, Vicky, I think the first thing to remember is that Baltimore is the 17th largest port in the United States. And although that doesn't seem like it would make it a major port in that regard, by the time you move everything that was going to go into Baltimore and push that into other ports around the nation, you're already taking ports that are extremely busy and adding more work onto them. In some cases, though, some of these ports could be as far away as California, the Los Angeles area, Hampton Roads, Florida, Hampton Roads in Virginia, and other locations. So you're going to see an increased traffic there. But what it comes down to is that you're going to see costs increase for certain goods, maybe as much as 2 to 3 times, depending on what it is. But Baltimore is a huge port for bringing vehicles into the United States. That's going to be the first thing hit. So imagine a Toyota Corolla that you were going to be able to ship into a car lot somewhere near Baltimore from the port in Baltimore. Now that vehicle could be going as far away as Los Angeles and having to be trucked across the country. So between insurance, fuel, hourly rates, or however the truckers are specifically paid, and all these things add up to increased costs. That's just vehicles. So when you start adding in things like some of the salt, the farming supplies, including tractors, and the various things that come into the port, that's a significant impact. The other piece of this is there are 15,000 jobs or so that are maintained because of that port that will be impacted in some way. I don't know exactly how. Add in that, and even those that are able to get into the port eventually, until that bridge is built, they're going to have to reroute a lot of ground vehicle traffic. All of this means increased costs for a variety of goods across the country, and the impacts will be felt at least for months. And as the bridge gets built, there will be some difference for, could be up to a couple, 3 years.
Thank you for that. So we heard a lot about the rumors that could be a cyber attack and a terror cyber attack. So what is your point in that? Do you think that could be possible? And who do you think would be the most ally or the most third party would benefit from that?
Well, first of all, it's possible, certainly. Now, what I have not seen is proof. So, what I like to do is sit back a little bit and wait and see, because I don't want to come out right away and say, oh, this was a cyber terror attack. Well, unless you show me proof of that, I'm not going to say it. I'm going to say that it is a distinct possibility. And it could be a physical attack too. Who knows what went on that ship? It could just be one of those things that falls into the category of bad things sometimes happen. So I lean more towards that than I do necessarily a distinct foreign adversary attack, or maybe even inside the boundaries of the United States if someone decided to do something on the cyber world. But I'm open to all possibilities, and I'm standing by to see if there's something that can prove any of that specifically. And I'm not saying that someone came out and said, I had sources deep inside the national security apparatus of the United States telling me this was an attack. That's not proof to me. Anybody can say that. So I don't want to overreact to it, but I do want to ask the harder question, which is, what if it was?
Yeah.
What vulnerabilities have been exposed? What have our adversaries seen that they can take advantage of? From the boat itself or the ship itself to the bridge, what lesson have they learned about the security and stability of our bridges to these kinds of attacks when the bridge is this old? And what other potentials are there out there? Because like you said, someone gains. If someone did this intentionally, then someone gains. And it could be as much as anybody, someone in the United States messing around who has the capability of doing that kind of a cyber attack, or other kinds, who knows. But clearly it's easy to talk about adversaries like Russia and China and Iran and others who are always happy to see the American economy in any way take a hit. So that is a possibility as well. But until there's something in front of me that proves exactly how it happened, I'm kind of in wait and see mode. But either way, our economy's been impacted, and those who are foreign adversaries to the United States are certainly happy to see it happen, whether they caused it or not.
So there are already rumors that this also could be a kind of a 9/11 event, like an in-house job. And like you said, that you want to first see if there comes out more evidence. But what would this tell you if this would really gonna be proof that this was an inside job? Do you think America is on a turning point, that it has to be now their own agencies to attack themselves to get any reaction?
Well, all that always has been a concern. Is our agencies and our federal government have done everything they possibly could so far to destroy any trust that the American people had in them. And that's not our fault. That's theirs through their own actions. I wouldn't ascribe this ship striking a bridge in Baltimore as a 9/11 style event as far as scale is concerned. But if it is proven that our agencies were somehow involved, or simply passively watched as something happened that they knew was going to come anyways, I consider those very much almost the same thing. So to the American people, that just continues to show them that their agencies can't be trusted, and they're right not to do so because of their track record right now. And whether it's malevolence and a desire to pursue evil means, or just sheer incompetence and ignorance, both of them are in spades, unfortunately, throughout our federal government. So if you take this event again and look at East Palestine, Ohio train derailments and a number of things in the patterns that we see across this nation, it's certainly concerning if we can prove that our own agencies or our own government was involved in some way in all of these things, or if bad actors were just allowed to act in spite of our federal agencies' knowledge of what they were doing. Look at the southern border. They know what's happening and they're ignoring it. So whose fault is that?
That's a very interesting question. And going there, how can the American government gain trust again? Does it has to be through a totally different kind of ruling system, like having Trump replaced as president? Or how do you think can America's agencies get trust again? Because even if there's a new president, there are so many years of distrust. How can this gonna be changed?
Yeah, we're talking about a multi-year process. It's not just going to happen regardless of any election of any president. And that's because the DC system will always be there regardless of, I mean, basically they watch the presidents come and go and they're only remotely interested in who they are because they're just going to continue with the agenda they've held for decades. And that's a sad testimony to America's federal government that is way beyond the scope and scale of what they're intended to do. So how do you build that back? Because trust is lost in a moment, but it's built over years. So first of all, how about we start by getting back to governing in accordance with the 18 enumerated powers in our Constitution and those things laid out in the Declaration of Independence and do nothing else but those aligned with their duties to us, the people who hire them, to secure and defend this nation and protect our liberties. That's how they could start building trust. Govern in accordance with the documents that are supposed to guide them every single day. Unfortunately, not being naive, I know they have no desire to do that for the most part inside the Beltway of DC. That's why most of the American people have simply written them off as so corrupt that there's just no hope for them, and they're going to focus locally.
So then putting all the rebuild cost on the American taxpayers isn't a good start then either. Or what is your opinion on that?
That's a terrible idea to come right out of the gate and have Joe Biden say, I'm going to work with Congress and have the American people foot the bill for this accident. I would love if I went, 2 years ago, I flipped the truck into the ditch and I destroyed my truck. Well, I would love to be able to turn around the next day and say, you know what, I'm going to get the American people to pay for this. That's just not how this works. You have a shipping company with insurance. That's a great place to start. And if you're not willing to allow the insurance adjusters to do their job, well, we go back to that trust issue. What are you trying to hide by miraculously coming out the next day and saying, oh, we're just going to cover the whole thing and pay for it?
Yeah, that's my would be a question. So what they're going to hide, because the insurance company is probably going to send some experts to see what happened and who is actually causing or did cause that. So that's a good question what you say too with the trust issue there. So we heard, or I heard a lot of people saying, oh, that's a black swan event and the election is near. So what are you thinking about putting such a big word about this incident? This is a black swan event.
Well, if it was a black swan event, it was horribly executed because it really didn't have the effect that they'd be thinking of on a national scale. Yeah, we paid attention to it. It was in the news. I mean, and frankly, look at it right now. How much do you hear about this in the news, even a few days later? Not a lot.
No.
And so I would say that I'm not ready to call this anything like a black swan event. Something like that, I think, is going to be a lot bigger and a lot more visible and consume the news cycles for a lot longer, because the goals of these black swans events are to elicit responses that are much more significant than what this likely accident did in Baltimore. But if it was, again, intentional, it'll lead to a pattern. But by itself, as a singular event, I don't give it that scale or that kind of a credibility to give it a black swan title.
So what do you think are the intentions then from the groups who are calling that a black swan event, that they want to divide more the country and make the people more curious about the distrust in the government? Because that's more making a bigger problem out of it. It's a huge problem to have this bridge crashing down and destroyed, but putting now those words like, oh, that's a black swan event, because this is kind of an idea of, oh, what does the government next? So making the people more excited. Do you think that's the intention in it, or that people just put that word out?
Well, I think there are certain people who are always ready on the sidelines to jump in on every single accident now and say, oh, the government was involved, it was a black swan, or that was a false flag, or you fill in the blank. And unfortunately, there are events that I would say were that. January 6th is one of them from the inauguration day. So nothing of that scale that I have seen has happened since that day to equal. But because of that, and because of that loss of trust in our government and their own actions by swatting innocent business owners and innocent people who happen to be pro-life and that kind of thing across this country, that loss of trust has led to a lot of people assuming that every single thing that happens has a nefarious government action or even foreign adversary action against it when it may not be. What that does, and you're used to this too, with the military, on the military side of things, is if you get flooded with reports, in this case, over 4 or 5 years of all kinds of bad things happening, and it's constantly happening, and some of them are government caused, but the majority of them are not, well, most people are going to default with everything is government caused because that's just how we're wired. There's so many reports that we have to assume. We can't decipher the difference with where we're sitting on an average American and sitting in the basement of their house or something. So they're going to assume worst case scenario, and the people who are putting that out there, sometimes they're trying to get clicks, they're trying to get followers, they're trying to put shock news out there to increase the number of people who are paying attention to their Twitter page, things like that. Somewhere in all that noise, there's a truth that needs to be found, and that's what I care about personally. The noise is not that interesting. I like facts and evidence. But we go back to the word trust. And because our government does the things that makes it inevitable that people don't trust them, then people aren't going to trust anything that's happening around them. And whose fault, again, is that? Generally, it's not we the people. It's the government agencies.
Okay, so the best thing what we can do is right now to wait for the facts. But even after saying that America's taxpayers have to pay the restructuring companies, do you think there is any facts coming out after that? Because that's literally putting a silence cap over it and saying, okay, we just pay for it and everything is okay.
Well, I think that's what those who are trying to prevent the insurance adjusters and stuff from looking at this are hoping for, is bypass it. Let's just get back, hurry up, and let's get this thing built because there's a huge impact on the American economy. Well, I'm a big fan of the space race type of pursuit of fixing things and giving it total effort to fix something this big. But I don't think that, again, that's not Biden's role, nor is it yet the Congress's role. They need to wait and make sure they know what the facts are before they move forward with this. And if the American people say that they are willing to pay for it, then they should let their representative know that. Make a phone call. But just to come out and declare it, does the federal government pay for everything that happens anymore anywhere? No, that's not really how it works, unfortunately. But I guess it remains to be seen. I hope it gets fixed and quickly, things get back on their feet as quick as possible. But I also like to have the complete truth of what happened in hand.
Okay, thank you so much.
Ja, thanks, Vicky.
Das war der USA-Report. Ich hoffe, ihr schaltet beim nächsten Mal wieder ein und ich bedanke mich für eure Aufmerksamkeit.